This pastor hid a gruesome secret for years. Chapter 1. In the quiet town of Selma, Tennessee, Matthew Winkler was everything a small-town pastor should be. He delivered passionate sermons at the 4th Street Church of Christ, counseled troubled parishioners, and was known throughout the community as a devoted man of God. His wife Mary and their 3 young daughters completed the picture of an ideal Christian family. But on March 22, 2006, this carefully constructed image would shatter in the most shocking way possible. Matthew Winkler was found dead in the parsonage bedroom, shot in the back with a shotgun. His wife Mary and their 3 daughters had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a crime scene that would rock this tight-knit religious community. The case has been featured in numerous true crime documentaries, including Investigation Discovery's Deadly Women and Oxygen's Snapped. The story of Mary Winkler would challenge everything people thought they knew about domestic abuse, religious authority, and the breaking point of human endurance. What emerged during the investigation was a tale of psychological torment, financial deception, and sexual abuse that had been hidden behind the facade of Christian perfection. Mary Winkler, the quiet pastor's wife who had seemed so devoted and submissive, had been living a nightmare that no one in their community could have imagined. The case raised uncomfortable questions about the culture of silence that can exist within religious communities, where appearances matter more than reality, and where questioning authority, especially male religious authority, is discouraged. The shocking truth that emerged was that Matthew Winkler, the respected man of God, had been systematically destroying his family through financial fraud, psychological manipulation, and sexual abuse. The pastor who preached about love and forgiveness had created a hell on earth for the woman who had promised to honor and obey him. As we delve into this disturbing case, we must ask ourselves, how does a devoted wife and mother reach the point where she sees no option but to kill? What drives someone to such desperation that taking a life seems like the only escape? If you're finding this story as compelling as it is disturbing, make sure to subscribe. The psychological journey we're about to explore reveals the darkest secrets that can lurk behind the most respectable facades. Chapter 2. The Perfect Pastor's Family. Matthew Bryan. Winkler was born into a family where ministry was not just a calling, but a way of life. His father, Dan Winkler, was a respected minister in the Churches of Christ denomination, and Matthew seemed destined to follow in his footsteps. He was raised with strict religious principles that emphasized biblical authority, traditional gender roles, and the importance of maintaining a godly appearance. Matthew attended Freed-Hardeman University, a Christian institution known for training ministers. During his college years, he met Mary Carol Freeman, a quiet, devout young woman who seemed to embody everything a minister's wife should be. Mary came from a religious family and had been raised to believe that a woman's highest calling was to be a supportive wife and devoted mother. Their courtship followed traditional patterns within their religious community. Matthew was the leader, the decision-maker, while Mary was the supportive partner who looked to him for guidance. Friends and family saw them as a perfect match. A strong, charismatic man who could lead a congregation and a gentle, submissive woman who would support his ministry. Matthew and Mary married in 1991 in a ceremony that friends described as beautiful and traditional. Their first daughter, Patricia, was born in 1994, followed by Mary Alice in 1996 and Brianna in 1999. To the outside world, the Winkler family appeared to be thriving. The family moved several times as Matthew accepted positions at different Churches of Christ congregations throughout Tennessee and Alabama. Each move was seen as a step up in his career, and Mary dutifully packed up their household and established new homes wherever Matthew's ministry took them. In their various communities, the Winklers were known as a model family. Matthew was praised for his passionate preaching and his ability to connect with congregation members. Mary was equally admired for her quiet strength and dedication to her family. She taught Sunday school classes, organized church events, and was always available to help other families in need. Matthew's preaching style was passionate and authoritative. He spoke with conviction about biblical principles, family values, and the importance of living according to God's Word. His sermons often emphasized traditional gender roles, with men as leaders and women as supportive helpers. The family's financial situation appeared stable, though not lavish. Matthew's salary as a minister was modest, but they seemed to manage well. They lived in church-provided parsonages, drove reliable cars, and the children were well-dressed and well cared for. Community members often commented on how blessed the Winklers seemed to be. They had a strong marriage, beautiful children, and a successful ministry. Matthew was respected by his peers and loved by his congregations, while Mary was admired for her devotion and grace. Make sure to share this story with others, fascinated by how evil can hide behind religious facades. What no one could see was the darkness that was beginning to grow beneath this perfect surface. The pressures of ministry life, combined with Matthew's increasing need for control and his growing financial problems, were creating a toxic environment that would eventually destroy everything the family appeared to represent. The perfect pastor's family was about to reveal that perfection itself can be a prison, and that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden behind the most respectable appearances. Chapter 3. The Hidden Darkness. Behind the carefully maintained facade of Christian perfection, Matthew Winkler was developing into a man whose private behavior stood in stark contrast to his public persona. The transformation from devoted husband to controlling abuser was gradual and insidious, beginning with small criticisms that escalated into systematic psychological torture. Matthew's control extended to every aspect of family life. He made all financial decisions without consulting Mary, controlled the household budget with an iron fist, and required her to account for every penny she spent. He presented this as responsible stewardship, but it was actually a means of keeping Mary dependent and powerless. The sexual abuse began gradually and was framed by Matthew as his biblical right as Mary's husband. He would quote scripture about wives submitting to their husbands and claimed that her reluctance to comply with his increasingly degrading demands was a sign of spiritual weakness. He convinced her that her discomfort was a character flaw that she needed to overcome through prayer and submission. Matthew's demands became increasingly bizarre and humiliating. He forced Mary to engage in sexual acts that she found degrading and painful, always justifying his behavior with twisted interpretations of biblical passages about marital duty. When she resisted, he would become angry and accuse her of being a bad wife and a poor Christian. The financial pressure on the family was mounting, though Mary was largely unaware of the extent of their problems. Matthew had been living beyond their means for years, using credit cards and loans to maintain the appearance of financial stability. He had also been engaging in various schemes to supplement his income, some of which bordered on fraudulent. Matthew's preaching became more intense and focused on themes of obedience, submission, and the consequences of disobedience. He would deliver passionate sermons about wives obeying their husbands while looking directly at Mary in the congregation, sending a clear message about his expectations. The children began to show signs of stress in their household. They became more withdrawn and anxious, particularly around their father. Matthew's discipline was harsh and unpredictable, and the girls learned to walk on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. Mary's mental health was deteriorating under the constant pressure and abuse. She suffered from depression and anxiety, but was afraid to seek help, knowing that any admission of problems would reflect poorly on Matthew's ministry. She felt trapped between her religious beliefs about marriage and her growing desperation to escape. The isolation was particularly devastating for Mary. In their religious community, divorce was virtually unthinkable, especially for a minister's wife. She had been taught that her role was to support her husband's ministry regardless of personal cost, and that any problems in their marriage were likely her fault. Matthew's behavior became increasingly erratic as financial pressure mounted. He would have explosive outbursts over minor issues, followed by periods of apparent remorse where he would claim to be under stress and promise to do better. These cycles kept Mary hoping for change while trapping her in an increasingly dangerous situation. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're finding this psychological analysis as disturbing as we are. The sexual abuse escalated to include scenarios that were clearly designed to humiliate and degrade Mary. Matthew seemed to derive pleasure not just from the acts themselves, but from Mary's obvious distress and reluctance. He had transformed their intimate relationship into a tool of domination and control. Mary began to experience what psychologists recognize as complex trauma, the result of prolonged exposure to psychological, physical, and sexual abuse by someone in a position of trust and authority. Her sense of reality became distorted as Matthew convinced her that his behavior was normal and that her resistance was the real problem. The community continued to see the Winklers as a model family, completely unaware of the hell that Mary was experiencing behind closed doors. Matthew's public persona provided perfect cover for his private behavior, and Mary's training in submission ensured that she would never expose the truth. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point and Fatal Shot. By early 2006, the pressure on Mary Winkler had reached unbearable levels. Matthew's abuse had escalated to new heights. The family's financial situation was becoming desperate, and Mary felt completely trapped with no way out. The financial crisis that Matthew had been hiding was finally coming to light. He had been stealing money from the church, and discovery was imminent. Matthew's response to mounting pressure was to increase his control over Mary and take out his frustrations on his family. His sexual demands became more frequent and degrading, and he began threatening Mary with consequences if she didn't comply. He told her that if anyone discovered their financial problems, it would be her fault. The psychological torture was constant and relentless. Matthew would wake Mary up in the middle of the night to berate her for imagined failures, criticize her in front of the children, and subject her to hours-long lectures about her inadequacies. He convinced her that she was worthless and that no one would believe her if she tried to tell anyone. The final straw came in March 2006, when Matthew's financial crimes were discovered by church officials. Someone had noticed irregularities in the church accounts, and an investigation revealed that Matthew had been stealing money from the congregation for months. The discovery threatened to destroy not only his ministry, but his entire public image. Matthew's reaction to being caught was explosive and terrifying. He blamed Mary for the financial problems, claiming that her spending had forced him to take desperate measures. He threatened to tell everyone that the financial problems were her fault and that she would be responsible for destroying his ministry. The night of March 21, 2006, Matthew subjected Mary to one of the worst episodes of abuse she had ever experienced. He forced her to engage in particularly degrading sexual acts while berating her for being the cause of their problems. He told her she was worthless, that she had ruined his life, and that she deserved whatever happened to her. On the morning of March 22, 2006, Mary Winkler reached a psychological breaking point that had been building for years. After enduring another night of abuse, followed by Matthew's threats to destroy her reputation and take away her children, something fundamental shifted in Mary's mind. After the children left for school, Matthew continued his verbal assault. He told her he was going to tell the church board that the financial problems were her fault, that he was going to divorce her and take the children away, and that he was going to make sure everyone knew what a failure she was. Something inside Mary finally snapped. Years of abuse, humiliation, and psychological torture had pushed her beyond her breaking point. The woman, who had been taught to submit and endure, had finally reached the point where she could endure no more. Mary went to the bedroom closet where Matthew kept a 12-gauge shotgun. Later, she would say that she didn't remember making a conscious decision to get the gun. It was as if she was moving in a dream, disconnected from her own actions. The psychological trauma had left her in a dissociative state, where her mind was protecting itself from reality. Matthew was lying on the bed when Mary entered the room with the shotgun. According to her later testimony, she didn't intend to kill him. She just wanted him to stop threatening her, to stop the constant abuse. She pointed the gun at him and told him to stop talking, to stop hurting her. Mary said the gun went off accidentally, that she didn't mean to pull the trigger. The physical evidence showed that Matthew was shot in the back, suggesting he may have been turning away when the gun discharged. The shotgun blast killed Matthew instantly. Make sure to subscribe to follow this tragic story to its shocking conclusion. Mary's immediate reaction was shock and disbelief. She stood over her husband's body, unable to fully comprehend what had happened. The fog of dissociation that had protected her mind during the shooting continued to shield her from the full reality of the situation. Instead of calling police, Mary went through the motions of a normal day. She picked up the children from school, told them their father was injured and they needed to go away for a while, and began driving with no clear destination. For 3 days, she drove aimlessly with her children before being arrested at a motel in Alabama. The arrest of Mary Winkler marked the beginning of a legal and media circus that would expose the dark secrets of the Winkler family and challenge everything the community thought they knew about domestic abuse and religious authority. Chapter 5, The Investigation, Trial, and Aftermath. The investigation into Matthew Winkler's death quickly revealed that the picture-perfect pastor's family was far from what it appeared to be. As law enforcement dug deeper, a disturbing pattern of abuse, financial fraud, and psychological manipulation began to emerge that would shock the religious community. Financial investigators discovered the extent of Matthew's fraudulent activities, which were far more extensive than anyone had imagined. He had been stealing over $17,000 from the church, kiting checks between multiple accounts, and engaging in various get-rich-quick schemes that were completely inappropriate for a minister. The investigation revealed Matthew's involvement in questionable business ventures and his collection of violent pornographic material, much of which he had been forcing Mary to recreate. Medical examinations of Mary revealed physical evidence consistent with long-term sexual and physical abuse. Psychological evaluations painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically broken down by years of abuse. She was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and battered woman syndrome, a psychological condition that develops in victims of prolonged domestic abuse. Mary Winkler's trial began on April 9, 2007, drawing national media attention and dividing public opinion about domestic abuse and religious authority. The defense built their case around battered woman syndrome, arguing that Mary's actions were the result of years of abuse that had left her in a dissociative state. The most shocking testimony came when Mary herself took the stand to describe the abuse she had endured. In a voice barely above a whisper, she detailed years of sexual degradation, psychological manipulation, and financial control that had left her feeling trapped and hopeless. Expert witnesses testified about the dynamics of domestic abuse and how victims can become trapped in cycles of violence and control. They explained how religious communities can sometimes inadvertently enable abuse by emphasizing submission and discouraging divorce. The trial revealed how the Churches of Christ culture had contributed to Mary's isolation. Witnesses testified about the denomination's emphasis on male authority and female submission, and how questioning a husband's behavior was often seen as a spiritual failing. On April 19, 2007, the jury found Mary Winkler guilty of voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder, acknowledging that while she had killed her husband, the circumstances of long-term abuse had diminished her culpability. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but was released after serving only 210 days. The light sentence sparked debate about whether justice had been served and whether the legal system was sending the right message about domestic violence. Mary's release was followed by a bitter custody battle for her 3 daughters with Matthew's. Parents, don't forget to like this video if you're finding Mary's story of survival as complex as we are. The case had a profound impact on the Churches of Christ denomination and other conservative religious communities. Many congregations were forced to examine their own cultures and practices, questioning whether their emphasis on male authority might inadvertently enable abuse. The broader domestic violence advocacy community embraced Mary's case as an important precedent that helped establish legal recognition of battered woman syndrome. Her case became a teaching tool for law enforcement, legal professionals, and social workers dealing with domestic violence cases. Mary eventually regained custody of her daughters and attempted to rebuild their lives away from the spotlight. She changed her name and moved to a different state, seeking privacy and normalcy. The process of healing was long and difficult, requiring extensive therapy and support. The case highlighted the need for better training for religious leaders in recognizing and responding to domestic abuse. Many seminaries began incorporating domestic violence awareness into their curricula, and religious organizations developed resources to help clergy members support abuse victims appropriately. Years later, Mary spoke publicly about her experience, hoping to help other abuse victims recognize the signs of dangerous relationships and seek help before reaching their breaking point. She emphasized that violence should never be the answer and that there are resources available for people trapped in abusive situations. The legal precedent set by Mary's case continues to influence how courts handle domestic violence cases involving victims who kill their abusers. Her case helped establish that prolonged abuse can create psychological conditions that affect a person's mental state and decision-making capacity. The story of Mary Winkler remains a powerful reminder of how evil can hide behind masks of respectability and religious authority. It challenges us to look beyond appearances and to create communities where victims of abuse can find help and support before reaching their breaking point. The case ultimately asks difficult questions about justice, mercy, and the complex factors that can drive someone to violence. While Mary's actions were tragic and irreversible, her story has helped countless others understand the dynamics of domestic abuse and the importance of creating safe spaces for victims to seek help. If this story has moved you as much as it has moved millions of others, subscribe to the channel to discover other real stories that have challenged our understanding of crime, justice, and the incredible complexity of human behavior in extreme circumstances.